Hello everyone. Welcome to the series of webinars. Hope you are now seeing us on the live streaming on the Facebook and on Zoom. Yes, people are coming from everywhere. This is great. Have you seen numbers now, Gareth? It's just amazing.
I can't see, Nuran. I can't see the numbers.
I will show them to you. You can see them at the participant point, at the participant icon.
Okay. Oh, great. Lots of people. That's wonderful. So many people from everywhere. Great. Fantastic.
Yes. Welcome, dear researchers and the researchers to our webinar. This is so much. You will, for the first time in any webinar, you will see how we are bringing fun to science. This happens only when we have Gareth, by the way. So, by the way, Gareth have no idea who is attending, from where, and so on. He just open to help everyone and spread the research knowledge. So, welcome, Gareth, to our webinar. Happy to see you here. And thank you for standing this long holidays. I know you have no clue what is going on through the fasting and so on. I'll tell you about it later, but thank you for holding this. Everyone, please write your questions during the webinar at the chat box. Also, if you found the Zoom room full, you can refer to the Facebook live streaming. Our communication manager, Sarah, will post the link here in the chat box. Also, please mute your microphones. I guess you are hearing my baby now. So now, mute your microphones, write whatever you want to ask at the chat box, and enjoy the webinar. You will also find a link to be filled for the certificate form, because there is another separated for the certificates. After getting your certificate, don't forget to share it on the LinkedIn and Facebook and mention Research Square, Gareth, Mars Medical Agency for Research and the Statistics, and everyone, so we can celebrate that you have invested in your time to join us in this webinar. Welcome, Gareth.
Thank you so much, Nuran. It's wonderful to be here again. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. It's great. And welcome, everybody. So good to see so many people joining us for this event today. Wonderful. We were talking just before we got started about the topic of our event today, which is how to respond and communicate with editors and peer reviewers. So maybe this is something that you've not been taught about. Maybe this is something that you've not thought about before in your research career. Well, hopefully this evening we'll be able to fill you in on some of those bits and pieces of techniques and tricks and communication skills that we hope will help you once you write your papers and you submit your papers to those international journals, those SCI listed Scopus Q1, Q2 top level international journals, how you can manage your submissions to make sure that they have the best chance of getting published. And a lot of this is about communication, how you deal with your peer review comments, how you talk to editors, how you manage the submission process, and how you back and forth communicate as your paper is in the submission process. So this evening, this is a Research Square Company, Mars Research Hub joint event, responding and communicating with editors and with peer reviewers. My name is Gareth Dyke. Let me just move to the second slide. I worked for many years in Ireland. I know it explains my slightly odd way of speaking in English. I worked in the United Kingdom. I worked in the US. I worked in Hungary. I now work with Research Square Company. You can check us out online. You can find me easily on LinkedIn. Research Square Company is the world's largest preprint server. We have lots of colleagues from around the world, putting their research up onto our preprint server, sharing it with other people before the paper goes into the formal peer review process. We have lots of articles in the system. We work closely with Springer Nature. We provide editing and professional services to Springer Nature journals. And in addition to my work with Research Square Company, my work with the Mars Training Network, I'm also an editor working with a journal that's published by Taylor and Francis. And this is my sideline work. I've been doing this for more than 20 years, and I get lots of communications from authors. I get lots of submissions. I get lots of emails from authors all of the time about their papers. And so one of the things that we're going to emphasize in our presentation this evening is how you, as an author, making submissions to international journals can maximize your success with the way that you communicate to editors and the way that you talk and deal with comments that come back after your papers go into the submission system. So you're probably thinking, why should I listen to this? What are we going to be talking about this evening? We're going to talk about the framework, the stages of the publishing cycle. And we'll come on to that in a moment, but we spend all of our time as researchers going round and around and around the same cycle, coming up with ideas, getting those ideas funded, coming up with data, collecting data, analyzing data, writing up papers for submission and publication, and then putting them into the international article submission system. So we'll talk about the stages of the publishing cycle, and we'll also give you some insights from our experience, from all of the work that we've done, from all of the years that I've been working with international journals, Taylor and Francis, Springer Nature, for example. Some examples of how you can communicate with editors and peer reviewers more effectively, and some ways to avoid some things not to do in your communication with editors and peer reviewers. So we're going to talk about the framework, the stages of the publication cycle, and we're going to talk about some tips and tricks for more effective communication. And it's all about being as effective as possible with your great research. Of course, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in if you weren't doing fantastic research. It deserves to get published in the best journals possible, but a lot of it is about selling your work to editors and managing the peer review process so that your work does have the best chance possible of making it into those international journals. So we're going to give you some insider tricks, some tips, some ways in which you can manage that good old academic publishing cycle. Ideas, funding, data, journal selection, very, 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 very important. Lots of people don't put the energy and time into that journal selection stage. We'll talk about that in a moment. Paper writing, we provide in collaboration with Noran, with the Mars Training Network, lots of content, lots of webinars, lots of workshops on article writing, structure of your writing, English language communication skills, submission. Lots of people are confused about how to submit papers to international journals. And then finally, stage 7, the peer review process. We're going to talk quite a lot about that this evening, how you can manage the comments that come back about your articles after you get comments back from the peer review process. It's all about communication. A lot of the tricks and insights and tips that I hope to share with you this evening are about being more effective in your communication with your research. So this evening, we're not going to talk about writing. We're not going to talk about putting articles together. You have that. You've got the paper. You're ready to make the submission. You're going to put the paper into the journal submission system. How to manage that submission in the most effective way to ensure that you have the highest possible chance of eventual acceptance in your target journal. And target journal, thinking about a journal, targeting a journal coming up with a place to submit your excellent, fantastic, wonderful research is the first stage of the process. And of course, we've all gotten emails like this. It's a joke, of course, in this case, but the message is nevertheless important. Dear Madam, many thanks for asking whether we would like to publish your paper. The paper is good and original, but unfortunately, we are simply not willing to publish it. The good bits were not original and the original bits were not good. Why is it that international researchers often submit articles to international journals and get rejected? One of the key things to keep in mind is that initial stage. Submitting a paper to a journal, that first stage of the process, often, in many cases, ends in rejection without the paper going out for peer review, especially if your target journal has a high impact factor. Journals like Nature, Science, those top of the tree international journals where we'd all love to get our work published, these journals have very high initial pre-peer review rejection rates. They are rejecting 9 out of 10 initial submissions before those papers go out for peer review. So one of the keys to our success as researchers is understanding that and managing that process with our article submission. So one of the ways that I want to start our discussion this evening is by talking about who you are going to be talking to, who you are going to be communicating with at a journal. There will be several different kinds of people that you may interact with throughout the process who are called editors. Now, a language editor, and I used to work as a language editor as well, is somebody who works on your paper pre-submission, working on the language, helping you potentially to get the English up to the standard necessary for submission. So let's put that kind of person to one side for this presentation. Unfortunately, in English, the word editor can refer to several different kinds of individuals that you may encounter in the process with your article as it wends its way through the submission system. So we are going to be engaging most often after submission with an academic editor, somebody like me who's working for a journal, making decisions about submissions to that journal, and probably not an employee of the publishing company, of the journal. This is somebody who has a full-time job working in a university or working as a researcher, doing their academic editing as well as their other jobs and responsibilities. So this person managing your paper 9 times out of 10 will be very busy, lots of things to do, lots of other tasks to undertake. So one of the key things to think about as a submitting author, putting your papers into a journal, is how you can make that person, that editor's job easier with the way that you communicate, with the kinds of ways that you write your emails, with the kinds of things that you put into the journal submission system. This is important information to think about as you begin that submission process. And we talked already about journal selection. We always encourage authors, researchers around the world to start off with their research thinking about a target journal. So before you begin the writing process, before you put pen to paper or start to type your next paper up, think about your target journal. I always say in these presentations that before beginning to write, it's very important to have in mind your message. What is it about your work, your piece of research, your great idea that you want somebody reading your paper to gain from that reading experience? What's the message? What's the key takeaway from your research, your message? Number 2, your audience. Where would you ideally be submitting this paper for publication? What's the key target journal for your research? So your message, your audience, so who's going to be potentially reading the paper, and of course then the structure. Message, audience, and structure are the three key things to think about before you begin the writing process. Now, lots of people that I work with in the publishing industry often say researchers around the world, they do lots of great work. They spend lots of time and money working on their research. They put lots of energy into coming up with great data, answering great questions. They spend research money, they put energy and effort into doing fantastic research. They also often spend lots of time and energy writing papers or paying people to edit their papers and getting the language up to scratch for submission to international journals. But they don't spend all that much time thinking about which journal to publish that work in. And that's a big problem for many researchers around the world. Journal selection is something that we often don't think about all that much. We get lots of emails, we talk to lots of, incoming messages, we see lots of information about journals, but how much effort and energy do we actually put into selecting good journals for our submissions? And often researchers don't do that. They just submit papers to where they've submitted papers before. They submit papers to where their supervisor or where their colleagues are submitting papers. They're not targeting effectively to journals that they deserve to get their work published in. So I would encourage you to think about your target journal, target your journal, come up with a list of journals that you would like to see your work published in, and put that list on paper and talk to editors, communicate with editors often before making your initial submission. Pre-submission inquiries are something that not enough authors, not enough researchers around the world actually do. You can write emails, you can communicate with journal editors, you can reach out to journal editors, you can say, I've got this research, I've got this idea, I've got this result. Would it be suitable for submission to your journal? And you can write as many of those kinds of emails as you like to journals, to editors. And of course, you can wait for the replies before you begin to write the paper. You can get the replies back. Editors will say, Dr. Dyke, I'm not interested in this paper, or they might ignore you completely, or they might say, that's great, please make that submission. We'd be very interested in seeing that paper potentially published in our journal. So I do encourage everybody to think about the use of pre-submission inquiries, lining up a potential target journal before you write your next paper, because that can really help with the process. And it's step one in your communication with editors, with journal editors around the world. Write those emails. I'll give you a template for that after the session today so that you can get a journal at least in mind before you start to write your next paper. So pre-submission inquiries, step one of the communication process. Write to editors. Write to as many as you like. You're not tying yourself down to anything. You're not committing to anything. Of course, if you make a submission to a journal, then you're saying that I'm submitting my paper only to this journal. But making pre-submission inquiries commits you to nothing. There's no ethical issue with writing 200 emails to lots of different journals and asking the editor whether they would be interested in seeing your work submitted. Of course, once you get a positive response, you've got a target journal, message, audience, target journal, and structure. You can start to construct your paper based upon the shape of that particular journal article structure. So you're answering lots of the questions that you may have in the writing process. So I do recommend that as a technique for being effective at the beginning of your communication with article, with authors, with journals, with editors. And we'll give you a template. Naran and I will send you an email with a template for this kind of email at the end of the session. So why not? Stage one in the communication process, you've got nothing to lose. Write to a number of target journals, put your journal author. We are considering submitting a manuscript. It's currently titled this. I've included the working abstract. We showed this, that, and the other. Would you be interested in considering this paper for peer review in your journal? And don't forget that high impact factor journals ask you to do this anyway. If you're going to make a submission to Nature, to Science, you're going to have to go through that initial author pre-submission step in the first place anyway. So why not do it as part of your normal communication to journals when you're putting papers together? The other thing related to this that I would recommend as a communication step is, of course, the use of preprint servers. If you don't know what a preprint server is, we can talk about that at the end of the session in our Q&A. But of course, Research Square, biggest preprint server in the world. We have more than 3 million preprints, 1 million preprinted authors just this year so far. What are they? Well, they're online repositories for academic work. You can upload your paper, your draft, put it onto a preprint server, and there are many out there. We can give you a list as well at the end of this session about the different preprint servers that there are that are available. You can share your work with others. You can share your work with peers. You can get comments back on your work before you put it into a journal submission system. Corrections from the community can, of course, often significantly improve the quality of your work. You share your work fast with other interested researchers. You get pre-peer review comments, and often journal editors will be looking at those preprint servers to pick up papers that would be potentially suitable for their journals. So it's a great way to put your work into the journal workflow before it finally gets reviewed, before it finally gets accepted. You can get cited immediately. So these are great ways to increase your institutional ranking, your individual citation rate. And people often worry, of course, that, by putting their work onto a preprint server, they could get stolen, their work could get stolen. But preprint servers assign what we call a Creative Commons license, and all of your work is stamped with a document object identifier number. So these articles, these pre-printed articles, can be cited just like any other work. It's just not yet not yet peer reviewed. But of course, it's a great way, as I've discussed, to share your work with the community. So you get protected using a reputable preprint server, putting your work out there, sharing it with the community, getting comments back on your work before your work goes into that submission system. So CC licenses, journals select from preprint servers. You often experience in this system full and open peer review. We'll give you a full list of preprint servers that there are out there around the world at the end of this session as well. So we've talked so far about the 3 things to think about before beginning writing your paper: your message, your audience, and your structure. And of course, your audience, that's your target journal. Your message, that's the key takeaway from your academic research. And the structure is based upon the journal that you select or that you get ready to submit to for your next submission. So you have your structure in mind, you can build out the shape of your paper. And of course, don't forget that by talking to editors before making your submissions, you're much more effective and you're much more able to get your work successfully steered into those international journals, keeping in mind, of course, that initially, in terms of communication, we are aiming to get our work through what's called editorial triage, that initial step of article submission to an international journal. It's just like getting hit by a bus out there on the street. You get rushed to the hospital, the doctors at the hospital, they triage you, they decide what's going to happen next. When you make a submission to an international journal, those editors decide whether or not your paper is going to go out for international peer review. They ask themselves, does the paper fit with the journal scope? Does the article have a clear message? Is it original? Is it important? Is it true? And is it relevant to our readers. The most important thing to think about when submitting to a journal: does your work fit with the readership of that journal? You've got to sell yourself. Communication is key. Selling yourself to international journals, the most important thing to think about when making submissions. Of course, very important, the higher the impact factor of the journal. 9 out of 10 papers, as we've discussed, submitted to Nature and Science get rejected before they go out for peer review. So our first goal in terms of communication, selecting a journal. Our second goal in terms of communicating with editors is ensuring that our work goes out for peer review. And as we move around that cycle, data collection, journal selection, paper writing and submission, we are thinking all of the time about how we can most effectively communicate with editors when making our submissions. So when you're there with your article, you're ready to make that submission, you're ready to put the paper into the submission system, you also need a fantastic, well-written, effective cover letter that goes into the journal with your article. Many authors, they waste the opportunity to sell their work to journals. They write something boring, they write something dull, they write something derivative. Dear editor, please consider for publication in your esteemed journal. You need to tell your editor why the paper is important and interesting for submission in that journal. Now, we get lots of cover letters at our journal, and many of them look like this. Authors say nothing. They don't write a cover letter. They just submit the paper. They expect that something magic is going to happen when the paper goes into the system. This is the worst kind of cover letter, making no effort to sell your work to the editor, no effort to communicate why your work is important. There's the second worst kind, the almost worst kind. That's the dull, the boring, the derivative kind of cover letter. Dear editor, please find our paper enclosed, which we hope you will find interesting. Yours sincerely, Gareth. Now, we've all been in this situation. We're making a submission. It's the end of the day. We want to go home. It's coming up on the close of the working day. You're in the submission system. You are putting your paper in. Those boxes come up. You're about to make your submission, and the box comes up asking for a cover letter. And of course, you haven't written one. So you just write something like this. It's a missed opportunity because editors read these communications. We take them into account when making decisions about what to do with articles. So you need to capture the editor's attention, get them interested in your paper. Here's one I made up earlier, but dear editor, compound X is a powerful anti-cancer agent. We synthesized this at 99% yield. Reactions catalyzed by this are 60% faster than those catalyzed by B. Our method for protein synthesis gives 50% higher yield. Why is the work interesting? Why is the work significant? Why is the work a good fit for that journal? Message, audience, and structure. And don't forget to give your editor some suggestions for peer reviewers in your cover letter. This is also something you must be doing. Journals will often not give you that opportunity when you make your submissions through their submission systems, but put some suggestions into the cover letter so that the editor can use them if she or he has that opportunity. So this is all about communication. It's all about maximizing your chances of success. The cover letter is one of the first sections of the paper that an editor's going to read. So make it count. Don't put something boring into the system. Why is the topic important? Why are the results significant? What's the key result? The breakthrough? Why is this an advance on previous studies? Why are you submitting to this journal? And don't forget to provide reviewer suggestions. From my perspective as an editor, we love it. We love it if authors talk about our journals. We love to read about why work is so significant and important and would be a good fit for our journals. So make sure you put that kind of information into the cover letter, maximizing your chances of success. Communication with your submissions, with your articles, it's all about making sure that you have the highest possible chance of success. I'll give you a template for writing cover letters, of course, at the end of our session this evening, but there's a standard way that you can do this, putting the right kind of information into the template, making sure that your editor is enthralled, excited, enchanted by your submission and wants to send your paper out for review. Don't forget about that editorial triage step that we talked about earlier. Getting the paper out for peer review is the most important initial step. As we move around the cycle, we are getting our papers into the submission system at international journals, targeting a journal in the first place, writing a great cover letter, getting in touch with editors before beginning the submission, putting the paper into the system, suggesting peer reviewers in our cover letters, and then waiting, often for a few months, for a few weeks, for comments to come back from those peer reviewers. And I would always say, if you end up waiting for more than 6 weeks, communicate with your editor. Don't wait, communicate. It's not in your interest for your papers to stay stuck in a journal submission system. If you don't hear anything back from an editor, it's time to write to the editor. It's time to get in touch with the editor. It's time to communicate with the editor. It's time to offer something back to the editor and maybe suggest some more reviewers, or maybe ask if you can help with something to speed up that manuscript submission system. The average time from submission to online publication across the industry is 90 days. So if you're waiting more than 6 weeks to get back comments after peer review, you should be communicating with your editor. But let's get ourselves into a position where the comments have come back. We've got those review comments back. It's important to think about how you respond, how you communicate back to the journal about the comments that have come back on your paper. Once reviewed, of course, the way that you manage the comments that a reviewer makes about your paper will likely determine your chances of acceptance. So if you see wording in the email that comes from your journal that's talking about comprehensive or major changes requested, then keep in mind that probably the paper will be going back again to the same reviewers. So the way that you respond in that situation is different to the way that you would respond if the paper comes back with minor comments or small changes requested, in which case probably just the editor will be making a decision about what to do with your paper before eventual acceptance. So how to respond? Be comprehensive. Show your editor that you do take the process seriously. Very, very important. And be aware of this important difference in the way that journals manage this process. Major comments, comprehensive revisions required. Probably they're going to send the paper back to the same reviewers again. So one of the ways to manage this in terms of your communication skills is to make sure that editors and peer reviewers always feel good about your responses. If they feel good, if they feel that you've done the best that you can do, if they feel that you're putting the effort in to make sure that your paper has the best chance of being revised effectively, then they will feel good too, and they're more likely to react positively to your paper. So good and bad ways to respond to the comments that you get in peer review. Thank the reviewer for their interest. The reviewer has correctly pointed out. We concur with the reviewer. Thank you for your time. This valuable insight is much appreciated. These comments significantly enhance the quality of our work. Being positive in the way that you respond to peer review comments, even if you disagree with them, can significantly enhance your chances of acceptance. So don't be negative. I do not think the reviewers understand my point. It would not be necessary to change this according to the reviewer's suggestion. We simply do not have these data. Repeating the analyses would not actually change our conclusions. Try to be positive, try to be forthright in your responses. Make sure that you are accepting the comments and being as positive as possible. That way, the reviewers, when they read, "Thank you for your time. We appreciate the time that the reviewers have put into this article. Thank you for the insightful comments," they will respond positively to your article in review. And of course, when you communicate with editors, that's also hugely important. "Dear editor, who reviewed my paper? I need to know. The comments I received are extremely unfair and just plain wrong. Who wrote this about my work? Please write me immediately." This is a real email that I got from an author at the journal that I am an editor of. Do we feel that this is going to enhance that paper's chances of eventual acceptance? Of course not. It's important, even if you feel unfairly treated, unjustly treated, if the reviewers have gotten the wrong end of the stick with regards to your paper, don't show that emotion in the way that you communicate with editors. Of course, reviewers hide their identities. Journals may want this blind peer review. Editors may want this in order to get comprehensive comments. So blind peer review is one way that you can make sure that there's no bias in the process around your papers. Selecting journals that use double-blind peer review may be the best option. And of course, you can do this as an author. You can submit papers to journals that use double-blind peer review. You can choose what works best for you. And of course, as well as we've discussed, you can consider using preprint servers and open peer-reviewed journals if that's what you feel is best for your work. So I give you some templates for responding effectively to peer review, some tips and tricks. Be comprehensive. We would like to thank the 2 reviewers who worked on our paper for their considerable efforts and for the time they devoted to our work. We have made almost all the changes requested and enclose a revised manuscript. Changes to our paper can be seen in red in the main document. Our responses and our comments are summarized in this document in red. So be comprehensive. All of the comments you receive in peer review, make responses to those comments, even the ones you disagree with. Thank the reviewers. We would like to thank the reviewer for this insightful comment, for the time they've taken on our work, and put all of your changes into your document. Again, we'll give you a template at the end of this presentation that will help you, I hope, to put together responses that are effective after you receive comments back on your articles in peer review. So we're moving around the cycle. We're communicating more effectively at the different stages of the publication cycle. Let's then think again about what to do if the paper's taking too much time. Communicate after about 6 weeks. If you haven't got those comments back on peer review, communicate with the journal. Don't wait. Communicate, I always say. Here's a template. Again, we'll give you this after the presentation to help you to ask for feedback on your articles if they've spent too much time in the peer review system. Again, then, what happens if your paper gets rejected? And I know this happens all the time. We get papers rejected probably more often than any other line of work. Unless you're working as a salesperson, you're going to get rejected as an academic quite often. Articles, job applications, grant applications. However, I would always say be confident and believe in your work. If you do feel that you've been unfairly treated, if you do feel that your paper has been rejected for an unfair reason, then don't forget that you can always appeal that decision to the journal editorial staff. You can always write to the editor. You can always ask for more information. How often do authors do this? Almost never, but you can. If you feel that you've been unfairly treated, if you feel that you've gotten comments back on your paper that are not fair, that are misrepresenting your work, and you've been rejected for a poor reason, do consider making an appeal. What have you got to lose? Your paper has already been rejected. So it's always worth writing to the editor to ask for more information. Again, in my opinion, having confidence in your research, in your ability as a researcher, in the contents of your research papers is one of the keys to success as an international researcher. You can see 3 examples of my own papers on this slide. Nature Communications, Nature, Journal of Microscopy. If we hadn't appealed the initial decisions from the peer review, from the editors' rejection, we would not have gotten these papers published. We felt in each of these cases that we had been unfairly treated, and we felt that we could manage that. We felt that we could respond to those comments. And so we wrote to the editors, we wrote to the editorial boards, and we ended up getting the papers reviewed again. And the papers did in the end get accepted. There are, of course, also things to think about in terms of ethics as an author, in terms of communication. You do not want to ever find yourself in the position where your paper's been accepted for publication and then you try to add some more authors. This happens all the time. Dear editor, thank you for reviewing my paper during your busy schedule. We've made some modifications and we've added 2 authors. This happens quite often, and it's a huge red flag for journals. Authors often think their paper's been accepted. Now it's okay to start adding additional authors. That's not okay. When you make the initial submission, you will be putting the authors onto the paper who contributed to that publication in the first place. So things to avoid after papers get accepted: putting additional authors onto the paper. And then the final stage of the communication process is at the proofing stage. When you get your papers back from journals and you're making those final changes to the document for eventual publication, be effective. Make clear line by line comments for the production team. Be unambiguous. Keep your changes to a minimum, because you may end up getting charged for any comprehensive changes to the paper as it moves into production. So be aware of this. Make your proof corrections as effectively as possible. You have to update your software. You'll be given a short deadline. You should stick to it. Make only 100% necessary changes, because of course, extensive changes to your paper are going to incur a cost. Changes to authorship or authorship order are very hard to make at this stage of the process. These will require signed consent forms from all of the authors. We get lots of authors who get all uptight, start shouting and screaming about their proofs. Once they see the final version of their paper, they stop communicating effectively. They start communicating very aggressively with journals. Production team members are not academic editors. They often are just trying to save space. Don't panic. Changes to your paper at this late stage can be done very effectively and very quickly. So a quick, polite email to the production team at this stage of the process is your best option. Here's a checklist for making those final checks as your paper moves into production: editorial policies and publication ethics, authorship and author responsibilities, any issues around research integrity, translations, plagiarism and duplication, image manipulation, conflicts of interest, potentially bioethics, corrections, retractions, support and ethical concerns. And as we talked about, Naran and I, in one of our earlier webinar presentations in the series that we've put together with the Mars Training Network, it is very important to promote your article after it gets published. Indeed, if you haven't got an ORCID ID, we do recommend that you get one right now, because this will help you with both the submission process and help you to be identified internationally amongst your peers and make those connections that can advance your career in the future. My key message this evening when writing to journals, when communicating with editors and with peer reviewers, is that your communication is key. We get lots of emails. Here's a real example of a bad one. Hi, where is my paper? I've waited for 2 months, looking forward to an immediate reply. Here's an example of a good email. Dear editor, I'm writing to ask if I can do something to help speed up my recent submission to your journal. Can I make some suggestions for additional peer reviewers? Now, if you were an editor receiving these kinds of emails about a submission, which would make you want to help the author? And that's something that I would always ask you to try to keep in mind when talking and communicating with journals about your papers. It's all about communication, and our goal, Naran, the Mars Training Network, and I, Research Square Company, is to help you maximize your success. Communication, very important. Any questions or any issues, of course, we are always here to help. So this evening, we have discussed the framework of academic publishing, the stages of the publication cycle. And we've also given you, I hope, some tips and tricks for good and bad communication at those different stages. Pre-submission inquiries, preprint servers, talking to journal editors, selecting a journal, managing peer review, and then how to deal with those comments that come back that might not be so particularly appropriate about your paper. And so thank you so much for listening. At this point, we'll pass back to Naran, and I hope that there will be questions and comments and feedback. We are here to help. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening to this presentation, and I hope it was useful. Thank you so much once again. Naran, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, guys. I enjoyed it so much. I guess all our researchers have enjoyed it, right? You know, yeah. There is a million thank yous on the chat box now. So I'm asking, have you any questions? Please don't hesitate to post your questions on the chat box. We are here to help. Okay, one of the questions, Gareth, she was asking about, now I have submitted my research on the preprint on Research Square repository. Okay, when I tried to resubmit it to a journal for publication, it showed that there's 100% similarities. So what I can do for this? How can I solve this? You're now unmuted, dear. Yeah.
Oh, so 100% similarity to the Research Square preprint. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Oh, so in that situation, you need to flag that when you make the submission to the journal editor. That won't be a problem, of course. When you make your submission to the journal, you just need to include the preprint of your paper, like as an attachment or as part of your cover letter when you make that submission, because of course you're gonna be saying to the editor that this submission that I'm making is already pre-printed on the Research Square preprint platform. Yeah, we'll provide everybody with templates. I see people are asking for those as well. We'll provide those in follow-up as well. Absolutely.
Yes, please, if you have any other questions, because the chat box is really running so quickly. So Sarah, is there any questions from the Facebook attendees? We will provide you with the certificates, the template, the lecture recording, and everything. Don't ever worry about that. We are here to help. This type of cooperation between Research Square and Mars is to help every researcher. So don't ever hesitate to ask questions, and you will receive your recording, your certificates, and the template via mail. You are very welcome. No questions on the Facebook. The next presentation will be in a couple of weeks, right, Gareth?
In 2 weeks, right? We're going to do them every 2 weeks.
Yes,
I think,
in
right?
2
So,
weeks.
great.
We run the series of webinars every 2 weeks. We will update you with the title and the link to attend our new webinar.
Great.
Thank you, everybody, for attending this webinar. I wrote my dissertation as a systemic review. Okay, let me just pick this question and make the analysis. My question here. Should I rewrite my paper to publish it? Yes, well, she's asking between the thesis structure and the manuscript structure, right? I'm getting it right?
Right.
Yeah. I'll mute myself.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You can pick a journal that will publish a systematic review. You can pick a journal that will publish a meta-analysis. So you could publish that as a systematic review. You could publish that as a meta-analysis, or you could rewrite and publish that as a primary piece of research literature. It depends on the results, and it depends on what you have. So if you share that with us, we can provide you with more information to help you in that particular case. Is there a free service on Research Square for language editing? Yes, there is. You can absolutely get access to a free editing service on Research Square. Let me just put that into the chat box. If you have a look at that, go to resources.aje.com digital editing web. You can get free trial of our digital editing service, which is a great way to get your papers edited initially in English. We're going to give everybody a recording of this, right? Nuran, everybody is going to get a recording. Lots of people are writing that.
Yes, so you will get the recording. I guess also my team will insert the English editing service by AGE via mails also, so you can benefit from it. There is a specific time for the free trial, and also this is handy, by the way. It is not costly. We are thinking about having subscriptions. So it actually in no time you get your wallpaper edited perfectly with the tracking and everything. So you will be very happy with the results. So please go to the digital editing and have fun. I know I'm using the term fun very much during this webinar, but I enjoyed this. Okay, any other questions? Please. Yes, this is very happy news, by the way. If you have any questions, please post it now. Yes. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you, Gary, so much for this amazing webinar. It's amazing as usual. But this one, I don't know, our attendees are from a perfect category. They are happy, enthusiastic, and enjoying the webinar, asking questions, and very interactive. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, guys. See you in a couple of weeks. Yeah, you are muted again.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Take care. Stay safe. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone. You will receive the recording through the mails. Okay. The email you have inserted in the certificate form, we will use it to send you the certificates, the templates, the recording link, and everything. Don't worry about it. And if you have any question, don't hesitate to send us emails or comment on our Facebook, LinkedIn. Yes, please add the certificate form. You are very welcome. You are very welcome. Thank you so much. See you in a couple of weeks.